A prominent attorney's remains were discovered in a burn pile in Georgia.
He goes, Amanda, like something to the tune of like, Daddy's in this burn pile. Like, I know what I've seen. I've been in Iraq. I know what burned bodies looked like. And I'm just sitting there on the phone going, what are you talking about?
Several years later, his wife of nearly 40 years is put on trial for his horrific murder.
All right, I understand y'all reached a verdict.
Yes, sir.
In July of 2018, human remains were discovered on a burn pile in a wooded area on a 10-acre property in Cherokee County, Georgia. The remains were identified as the body of a prominent Atlanta area attorney, Gary Farris. His wife, Melody Farris, told investigators her husband had started the fire on the couple's property days before his body was discovered. She reportedly told authorities her husband had medical problems and even suggested her husband, Gary, could have had a medical emergency or possibly an accidental death. Then the investigation took a turn when a bullet was found lodged in Gary's rib bones. And law enforcement found blood spots on the home's basement floor and steps. But a late-night phone call would lead to a huge break in the case. According to investigators, despite being together for nearly 4 decades, there was trouble in paradise between Gary and Melody. The two lived on separate floors in their home and hadn't slept in the same bedroom for years. And during the rocky relationship, Melody allegedly began an affair. She denied to investigators she was having an extramarital affair. However, the night before Gary's remains were found, according to investigators, she called her lover, Ray Barton, and told him he's on the burn pile. Melody wasn't arrested until nearly a year after Gary's remains were found, but faced several charges, including murder with malice, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and concealing the death of another. But it would be 6 years after Gary's remains were found that she would go on trial. Finally, in front of a jury, the prosecution claimed the mom of 4 killed her husband for money, and they said she had the means, motive, and opportunity to kill Gary.
The defendant, she liked the life of being married to a rich lawyer. When you shrink the world in a case like this, husband and wife, wife kills husband, husband dies. The answer to the question, who did it, sits right there. Melody Walker Farris. We do not know how many times Gary was shot. We know he was shot and killed. We know there are at least 2. The blood trail from the kitchen up there, we believe the evidence is they had an argument. She shot him. He goes downstairs trying to get away. She shoots him again. Whether he was able on his own to get out those doors or she got him out herself. Topped and bombed. No home invasion. No robbery. Nothing. And that brings us to what we call means, motive, and opportunity. How do you get away with a murder if there's no confession? How do you get away with a murder if there's no video of it? How do you get away with a murder if you try to burn and destroy all the evidence? You don't. When you use your common sense and all the evidence to put it together to shrink the world, and the only reasonable answer is she did it. For example, if they say Scott did it, Scott's not going to shoot us dead when he's paying all the bills. It's a gravy train. That's just not going to happen. Let's first talk about opportunity. The reason why you shrink the world down, and you will see at the times in this case, when he was killed and when his body was moved, when things are going on, the only person that's going to be at that house, the only person is her. No one else. Just her. Sure, people were coming and going, but not when things were going on. The other thing you consider is sometimes in the case, what's strong evidence is deception, mendacity. When you see that, she's cloaked in lies. And you'll see it through the trial. The evidence will show that.
But the defense was quick to poke holes in the state's theory of the case, and during their opening statement to the jury, the defense urged the jury to consider many of the questions that were left unanswered.
You're going to see from the evidence in this case, from day one, the investigation by Detective Hayes and all of the other officers in Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, even the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, everything that was done in this case was tailored specifically to attempt to convict Melody the death of Gary Farris. One big thing you're going to hear, and you're going to hear it a lot, is Scott Farris. You are going to hear the 911 call here shortly. That's the first thing we're going to do. I'm going to play you the 911 call. 13 minutes after law enforcement arrives, Scott Farris is already blaming his mother. He knows nothing. They're not even sure if there is a body on the burn pile. They're not even sure it's Gary. He's already planting the seeds of blaming his mother. 13 minutes. And law enforcement took that into their beliefs. And then they focused their evidence on that. And that is confirmation bias. Now, you heard Mr. Fogus talk about the Ferris wheel, and I'll talk about it too. That this was a turbulent family.
Over the course of the weeks-long trial, several witnesses took the stand, including Gary and Melody's children. Christopher Farris was the first of Melody and Gary's 4 children to take the stand, but as a witness for the state, testifying against his mother. Christopher, the oldest son, testified he saw his father's remains after they were discovered by his brother Scott.
And I looked, and I was like, wow. And then I saw what looked to me to be like a hand, like bones of a hand, like that. And that's when I just, I think I went in shock. And I went back up to the house and waited for the authorities to arrive. The paramedics, I guess, is who arrived first. But I sat on the back of my truck and really couldn't even talk.
Did you touch anything in the burn pile?
No.
When Scott had a stick and moved something, did you see what it was that he saw or was looking at?
I thought it was a rock. I saw but he told me after I put the girls back up to the room and I came back downstairs, and he told me I think it was human remains. And of course my brother and I had conversations after, while this situation is unfolding, and he told me, yeah, I think that's...
Was that before or after he called 911?
After.
Did you see him call 911?
I did not. He said he was going to call 911. He said, to get the kids out of here, I'm going to call 911. I didn't stick around long enough to hear him.
Was your mom nearby when you...
She was standing right there.
Did she say anything?
No.
He testified his father was experiencing health issues in the months prior to his death, so he initially believed he may have fallen into the burn pit. But it would be his mom's suspicious behavior that made him second-guess how his father died.
And they asked me, is there anybody who would want to hurt your father? And I said, no, I don't think so. And then they asked me, well, let me back up. They told me that they found a bullet in my father's rib. And now this was being treated as a homicide. And there were some follow-up questions, and they asked me, who would anybody ever benefit from your father being killed? And I was very frank. I said, well, yeah, my mom and whoever he's related to as far as financially. At this point in time, my brain had kind of already switched to thinking something had happened to him that wasn't falling in a fire.
Why did it switch?
Because of my mother's behavior when the police were there and just how she was acting.
What was that behavior? How was she acting?
Just not like somebody whose husband had just been found in a burn pile.
After Christopher was off the stand, his brother Scott also testified for the state and gave a horrifying and emotional account of when he found his father's remains.
At some point, ultimately, you did find the remains of your father, is that right?
Yes. How I found it, like I said, I was going to check the other side of the pond on, across the dam. And I started walking that way, and I believe I got either halfway across the dam or got to the other side, and then Melody called me. And she called me and asked, have you thrown a dead goat on the burn pile? I'm like, no, we haven't had anything to die, and also I wouldn't throw it on the burn pile. And she said, well, come up here and look at this. So I was like, okay. Well, I turned around and started walking, and I see Amanda walking. She was almost kind of like right in front of my dad's office, coming from the burn pile area, walking back up towards the driveway. She was walking there, and Melody was standing over near the burn pile. And I walk up and look, and I can already start seeing bones. And then I look down, and it appeared to me that it was the inside of a skull. The backside was gone, and you could see like the little blood vessels, I think it was, but it didn't look like a rock or something. So I grabbed a very, very small corner of it, and I lifted it up just enough to where I saw teeth and an eye socket, and I immediately put it right back. And I was crouched down, and she was standing right there next to me, and I raise up, I put my hand on, across her chest and push her back and go, these are human remains. I am calling 911 right now. Nobody's allowed down here. And at that same time, that's when I noticed Chris was there, and he was coming around the back side of the house with the girls on the RTV, and I walked right up to him and I said, get those girls out of here right now. I'm calling 911. And I pretty much, my brother would have argued or, with me on anything like that. And I believe just the look on my face and everything, he didn't second question me. He's like, okay. And he turned around and pulled off with the girls, and I called 911.
When you called 911, do you even remember what you said to them?
I believe that, they called and they asked, did the normal routine, and I said, hey, I was like, it was along the lines of, we've been searching for my dad, and after searching, we came across some remains in a burn pile. And I said, I was deployed to Iraq. I've seen bodies burned up. And it's like, this definitely looks like a burned up body. We need somebody out here now.
Were you thinking it was your dad?
Pretty much by that point, yeah, because there was nobody else who it could have been, and my dad was missing. I mean, my dad didn't have any enemies. There was nobody who, we never really had strangers walking across our property. No, never once did I've ever catch anybody on our property. So it was, within an instant, I knew that this was 99% sure this was my dad.
And like his brother, he began to pick up that his mom might have been involved when investigators revealed a shocking clue that changed the case.
At what point did you learn that there was actually a bullet was found in your father's rib?
So we were there very, very late at night. I know it was probably close to 11, midnight or so. And they kept us in a kind of a conference room, and they brought us one by one back into another room individually. I don't remember who they brought back first and all, but by the time they brought me back, I believe it was Detective Hayes that was there with me. I don't really remember the details of what all was discussed at first, and then I was informed that they discovered a bullet lodged in the rib bone.
Do you remember Detective Hayes saying, "I've got something I got to tell you"? You remember how he broached that or told you about it?
I don't remember his exact words on how he did that because, you know, once I was told that that was happening, that happened, my mind just went into kind of shock, I'll say.
At that point, did you suspect your mom?
Definitely.
I guess, was there a splitting of the family afterwards? Like some went one way and the others went the other way.
Oh yeah, I mean, once we found out that, you know, there was a bullet found in the rib bone, that, you know, obviously he's been shot and then burned, and we all, you know, we all put the pieces together because my dad had no enemies. I never once met anybody in my entire life that hated my dad. So we knew somebody, you know, wouldn't have come there. The house wasn't wrecked. I mean, there was nothing. Everything was adding up to us that it wasn't a robbery, and it wasn't anything like that. And, you know, her history of, you know, having affairs and doing all this shady stuff that she's done, and especially her making the comment, "I can't wait for the day he's dead and I don't have to live with him anymore."
Did Amanda support your mom or support y'all?
So I remember for several weeks, it seemed like, Amanda kept saying, "Well, he just had a heart attack and fell in the fire." And I was like, "Amanda, how could he have had a heart attack and fell in the fire when A, they found a bullet lodged in his rib bone?" And she's like, "Well, they could be lying to us." I was like, "Okay, well, if he had a heart attack and fell in the fire, why was everything gone from the fire pit?" It was like the RTV would have been there, or the tractor would have been there. There would have been something. There was no indication to, especially to me, that he would have had a heart attack and fell into the fire.
So Amanda was not convinced?
She was not convinced on
Was she?
him being shot.
Was she supportive of your mother?
Oh yes, I mean, like I said, she was always glued to her side from the time I showed up over to the house and even after, and she was always with her.
Now, afterwards, the property, the house, and the contents of the house and things like that, fair to say that your mother and you and things were having some problems, or some arguments over the disagreements, if you would, over the property in the house and trying to sell it and whatnot?
Afterwards,
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it was. She immediately after this was all about trying to get as much money as possible.
While the defense claims Scott had reason to kill his father because he borrowed money from him, Scott tearfully insisted he had nothing to do with his father's murder.
Did you murder your father?
I absolutely did not murder my father. Without a doubt, I loved him.
Look at me. Did you have anything to do to help your mother dispose of and burn your father?
Absolutely not.
Tell them, not me.
No. Like I said, I love my father. He was the backbone. He was the glue to our family.
By day 6 of the trial, Melody and Gary's oldest daughter, Emily Farris Payne, was called to testify against her mother. At the beginning of her testimony, she said she knew about her mother's affairs.
Basically, my mother began having an affair with Ted Wiley, and when my dad found out about it, that's pretty much when things went south.
Okay, let's talk about Ted Wiley for a little bit. Around what time did you become aware of that relationship?
Probably 2009, maybe 2008, 2009. I specifically remember when I found out about it. I just can't remember exactly the year, but I think it was
Sure. How did you find out about it?
My dad called me. He called me. I was working, and he called me when I was working, and I took a break to talk to him. And he told me that my mom had moved in with Ted, and that they were in a relationship. And that was pretty devastating.
Did your parents' financial relationship change?
Yes, it did.
How so?
So my dad removed her from bank accounts, or he, I guess, closed joint, open new. So she no longer was on the bank accounts. So she can, she didn't have access the way that she did before.
Tell the jury a little bit about what happened at your wedding.
It was a good wedding. I was the bride, so I was a little, I was like probably in another world compared to everyone else. But our family was there, obviously, everything was pretty normal with the wedding, but I don't know. I guess Rusty Barton came to the wedding. I knew he was invited. My mom included him on her guest list. He was there, and at that point, we were kind of aware that maybe something more was going on with him between her, my mom, and Rusty. And he came to the wedding, and from what I understand, they were like dancing together, like canoodling, if you will, during the reception.
When the questioning turned to Emily recalling the search for her father, she testified she had no idea he was missing until she got a call from her brother, Chris.
And eventually, did you get a call from any of your family members looking for your dad?
Yes.
Who called first?
So my brother Chris called me first when he was driving up there, and he said, so I just talked to Amanda, and apparently they can't find Daddy anywhere. And I think I said, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean they can't find him? He's like, they're apparently looking everywhere and they cannot find him. He said, I'm on my way up there right now to see what's going on.
Okay. And at that point, what was going on in your head?
Well, honestly, that morning driving in, I thought about that text message that I sent with Olivia's picture, and I thought back to that moment. Like, literally in the car on my drive in, I was like, that's weird. He didn't respond to that message. He always responds to pictures of Olivia, and he never responded. And so that's really weird. And so, like, that made me pause. But then after Chris called me, like, it just made me think about, like, it made me worry even more when he called and said that, because of the fact that my dad hadn't. Like, I had realized that morning that he hadn't responded to my text message. And that really made me worry.
Who was the next person you heard from?
I did talk to Chris like a few times. Like, he would kind of keep me up to date. The other person I spoke to was my mom. She called me.
Around what time was this? Do you remember?
It was before lunchtime. Tennessee's Central, so we're an hour behind. It was maybe like 10 or 11-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 11, 12 here, our time.
Yes.
And what did your mom say to you when she called?
She said, well, your daddy's missing. And I said, what do you mean he's missing? And she said, well, we're out here looking for him, and we can't find him anywhere. And I said, well, go look. Are his clothes still there? Is his CPAP machine still there? Like, did he leave? And, like, did he just leave? Like, and I said, go look for that stuff. Look for his keys. Look for his phone. Look for his wallet. Like, go look for that stuff. And she just kind of was like, okay, and got off the phone with me.
Okay.
She did call me back, however, And she asked me if I was on any of his bank accounts. And I said, no, why would I be on any of his bank accounts? She's like, well, I just thought that maybe you could log into the accounts and see if there's been any activity. I said, no, I don't have access to that. The next call I got was from Chris. And he said he's gone. I said, what do you mean he's gone? What are you talking about? And he said, Emily, he's gone. I was like, where did he go? He said, no, he's gone. He is gone. He's like, we think he's in the burn pile. And that's just kind of when it went, I just lost it. You know, I just said, I'm coming. I'm on my way.
Melody appeared to tear up as her daughter recounted arriving to their home after the news of Gary's death. She testified she thought more might have gone on with her father's death beyond what first appeared to be an accident, because like her brothers Chris and Scott, things changed for Emily when authorities told her her father had been shot.
You mentioned that was a sticking point for you. What does that mean?
I guess I just needed to hear that that's actually what happened. Like, I just needed to hear that from like a professional, so a trusting source, that's what had happened. And when I heard that, I thought, I mean, it just confirmed my beliefs.
What was the relationship like between you and your mom after this? Before you found out about the confirmation of the bullet?
I mean, it was normal. I was still talking to her. I mean, it kind of blurs together, but I mean, I know that there was a lot of her. I mean, we were all like just trying, like all hands on deck, just to help with getting information. Like, we had no idea if my dad had a will. We didn't know really anything. We were completely hit. We were hit by this out of the blue. So we were really just trying to figure out what to do, just to kind of take care of things and get access to things. And I mean, I was talking to her during that time. I mean, she's still my mom, so like I didn't like act any differently with her.
Okay. And at some point, did that change?
Yeah, I mean, she became more hostile. She was more aggressive with us. She was demanding money. Like, she would like bring up instances where my dad had lent us money or something, and she would be like, it's time to pay me back. Like, I need you to pay me back now. And I was just like, well, you know, I had a payment plan with him. Like, I wasn't just going to give him like a lump sum. And, you know, she was getting pretty aggressive with that. I guess that's kind of the best way to describe her behavior.
But there was one Farris sibling on their mother's side, and that was her youngest daughter, Amanda Bruce, who didn't testify as a witness for the state, instead a witness for the defense. She testified growing up that while her family appeared picture perfect on the outside, that wasn't necessarily always the case. When her mother's defense attorney asked her about her relationship with her dad, she remembered him at times as a doting father.
What was your dad like?
He was great.
Take your time. I feel like we've been in this trial for a while.
He was a very smart man. I'm sorry. There was no doubt in my mind he loved all of us. He made that known, and he was very sarcastic.
Lawyers are notorious for that.
He had the lawyer personality for sure, but I mean, he was the dad that you walk down the stairs and he'd whistle and go, "You're a movie star." Or when Emily had her baby, he texted me a picture of me holding Olivia, and he goes, "You're natural." Like, he was just so loving, and I can still.
Take your time.
He was just such a big man, and he'd come and he'd just wrap his arms around you. But then in this sense, he'd turn around and fart on you, and you'd just be like, like, He was sweet, and he was witty. He could say things that cut you to the bone. He definitely demanded respect in that aspect, I guess you would say. I was always fearful of him in the sense that I wanted to respect him and I wanted him to be proud of me. And when he would make comments that I was not doing as well as I should, I took that to heart, and I really wanted to make him proud.
But said she had a different relationship with him than her siblings.
Could you tell the jury what his relationship was like with Chris, for example?
I mean, I never saw them really do much together, I guess you would say, but I mean, Chris was grown. I don't know much about their relationship when they were younger. I don't really recall. I know that they were in a lot of fights over the past years about money.
Could you explain that to the jury? Best you can remember.
The best I can remember. I mean, it sounds awful, but I mean, he had issues with taking money, and he always had his hand out, but I don't doubt that he didn't love my daddy. I approach things differently than my siblings did.
What does that mean?
Meaning I never wanted anything in return for his love. Especially right before he died, I just wanted a mother and a father, and that was it. I didn't want any more of the drama. I didn't want any more of their marital problems. I didn't want to deal with any of it. I just wanted a mom and a dad.
And how did you know that he was stealing money from your dad?
Well, my mother made it very apparent. There was never any dirty laundry that both of them weren't willing to air out to all of their children.
So
there was
your
no
dad
boundary.
Would do that too.
Yeah.
So he would say, Chris is stealing from me.
Correct.
Okay. And was that in the months and weeks leading up to his death?
Years.
For years?
It's been a problem for as long as as the girls have been around, as far as I'm concerned.
How would your brother do it? You say steal from him. How would that happen?
It was all things that I was told, whether it be my mom, mostly my mom, because I don't think my dad really liked to talk about those problems. He liked to complain to me about my mother. But I mean, it was well known that he would take checks and he would cash them. He would take credit card numbers and he would use the numbers off of them. Just always needing stuff for the girls. Always had his hand out. I don't know how else to say it.
But Emily didn't do stuff like that, right?
She needed help from him. I think it was mostly for her husband. I know that she moved into her house in Thompson Station, and she would have not gotten that without him. He co-signed on an apartment in Atlanta because they couldn't get that on their own. But my dad co-signed for many things. Like, he co-signed on my second car. He didn't pay anything for it, but he co-signed on it. So
he was just helping out the kids in that regard.
You had to ask for it, but he was not just going to willingly give it out. But you definitely had to ask for it.
And how did it come to pass that he wound up on the farm that you knew of?
Because he couldn't make it on his own. It was kind of a running joke that he just was always going to, he'd complain that, oh, mama told me to do this, or daddy told me to do that. And I'm like, well, move out. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, don't live with your parents. They always said, oh, I'm going to work on the farm, or I'd work on the farm and things like, yeah, he did. I mean, I guess, but so did my dad, so did my mom. It was a kid that was living at home. And that was about it. Do
you think he was taking advantage of them?
I think anybody who asks their parents for money over the age of 20, 25 are taking advantage of people.
When her dad appeared to be missing and the siblings got together to search for him, she recalled her brother Scott making the gruesome discovery.
I walked all the way down. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking something happened to my dad. He's been out here working on the property, may have fallen out. Let's go look for him. So I'm searching everywhere. And I go walk that property line and I go over the dam that's by the left of the pond if you're standing on that side. And I walked up to the barn, probably walked either through the barn or around the barn. I don't really remember.
Now, I ask you this. Do you ever remember around this time Scott saying anything about the placement of the tractor? Did he bring that up? Did you hear that?
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Where you walked?
Walked up there, and I was calling out his name, trying to find him. I was getting desperate at this point and hoping I would find him. And I just had this gut feeling that something was wrong. And I had turned and walked down the driveway, and I was standing right as the driveway dips, and Scott calls me.
On your phone?
On my phone. And I'm looking over the pond and kind of just standing there at the fence, and he goes, Amanda, like something to the tune of like, Daddy's in this burn pile. Like, I know what I've seen. I've been in Iraq. I know what burned bodies looked like. And I'm just sitting there on the phone going, what are you talking about? And he was like, there's something in this burn pile. And I was like, what are you talking about? In pure just denial, I guess. And either he hung up the phone or I hung up, but I immediately called Chad and I said, you need to get here right now. This is what Scott is saying, and you need to come get Cameron. And next thing I know, I don't know if he walked over. I mean, everything, your whole world stops. And he came over and grabbed me by the arm as hard as he could, and he got in my face.
What who are we talking about?
Scott.
Okay.
He got in my face and he screamed at me. He said, I know what I saw. I know what it is, Amanda. And I was just, again, going like, what? And next thing I know, he said he called the 911, paramedics, whatever, and I walk up to the driveway. There's like a fork in the road.
I have to ask you this question, and I'll move on from this topic quickly. But you walked down to the burn pile earlier. And you and your mom looked at it together.
Briefly.
And neither one of you saw what you would believe to have been human remains.
Thank God, no.
But you say Scott was up behind you on the hill just staring at you both.
Yes.
Okay.
After Gary Farris was found dead, Melody went on to live with Amanda, and the cracks in her relationship with her brothers began to show.
When did it become apparent, or what could you tell from Scott and Chris breaking off from the family?
They eventually got very angry and irritated. I know Chris got mad at me because I told one of the detectives, I think his name was Tommy, that he decided not to go on vacation. Apparently that was a problem. He said we aren't supposed to talk to the attorney, so we were all on the same page.
You mean law enforcement?
Yes, sorry, law enforcement. That we should basically just go to the attorney if we have any questions, and just to keep to ourselves, and that's it. And he was handling the situation, the attorney.
In this time period or ever before, had you ever heard your brother Scott say, this is my property,
Yes.
this is my house?
Multiple times. He flaunted the fact that that was his property. I almost kind of like joked in a way he kind of vicariously lived through my dad.
There was properties that were owned by the family, and was your brother Chris ever appointed over that?
My sister at one point got a coroner's letter that we did not know about. My mother had tried to get a lady named Diane to help her figure out what needed to be done with the estate because it had been so long. And that's when she went to the courthouse and realized that Chris had filed for, I don't know what you call it, for the estate, but he was given ownership of the estate, and we did not know.
Okay. Well, tell me how that went.
Not well. I know that it turned into, I texted Emily at one point and I said, Diane's told me that there's been money taken out, and my dad owned the condo that my sister lived in Tuscaloosa, and said that it had, I don't know if it went into foreclosure or whatnot, but a property management company was in charge of, they would get the check and then Daddy, I assume, would give it to the mortgage company at that point, and it was not being done. So the condo was lost.
And that was the condo in Tuscaloosa.
Correct, and that's when I petitioned to have the third-party estate attorney. So none of us had our hands on it. It was purely an outside source, and I did not know that was an option until my mother spoke to Diane.
Okay. And so, did they loop you in on any of this, Chris and Scott and Emily?
No,
Right, so you were kind of left on the outside.
nobody talked to me about it.
Right. And is that because you were the only one showing any support for your mother?
I had to take care of her. I had no option but to take care of her at that point. Emily ran off back to Tennessee, and Chris and Scott were no help. I financially took care of a lot that first year. It was really hard on us, but we did it because it had to be done. God forbid something happened to the house, and I mean the mortgage was over almost probably $5,500 a month. And then the home insurance, I paid for that. So if anything were to happen to it, we wouldn't be in a really big situation, but that was $600 a month. Paid for the car insurance on all of the cars, including Scott's. And that's kind of where Scott and I fell out.
Melody had been out on bond after her arrest and lived with Amanda over the past 4 years. And in emotional testimony, she believed her mother to be innocent.